bed leveling gripes, leaky resin vats, Eiffel Towers that are falling over, and hotends that are bouncing? All this and more, PrintFix Friday, episode 37. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel with the longest weekly print fail fix series here on YouTube. Remember, if you want to get your fails looked at, you can do so by tagging us on all the social medias, as well as using the hashtag PrintFix. But if you are new here, make sure to leave a like and get subscribed if you think we deserve it. We're gonna start off with an Eiffel Tower that is actually a tripod. Let's see if you can figure out that one. Then we move into a failure from a fellow creator, Denise, who's just dealing with some bed leveling problems on a Sovol 3D printer. From there, we move into a leaky resin vat that caught me off guard a little bit, but thanks to the awesome community and our Patreon supporters, we were able to figure out this problem. We're pretty sure we got it right. Then we move into a fail where the filament is not where it is supposed to be and has actually wound itself around the printer overnight. And no, it's not coming out of the nozzle. From there, we move into a hot end that is just bouncing around like nobody's business, and thankfully was caught before it could cause too many problems. And then we're looking at a resin print that the support is absorbing into the object. It's a clear print and it's yellow. Post your comments below of what you think might be wrong with it. But you know what isn't an issue with it? My segue to our sponsor, 3D Musketeers. If you are tired of struggling to 3D print, or you just don't even want to bother doing it yourself, you can reach out to the pros at 3D Musketeers. We have almost 40 printers and over 40 years of experience helping people just like you make awesome every single day. Whether it is high detail resin, full color sandstone, FDM, and now even layer powder bed fusion. Yeah, TI-64 titanium now offered at 3D Musketeers. We can help you make awesome. And if you're local or don't mind flying us out someplace, we can help you scan whatever it might be. Whether you want to turn yourself into an NFT or you want to reverse engineer some awesomeness, we can help make that happen here at 3D Musketeers. You can reach out to us with the links in that description down below. And if you do want to help out with what we do here with this content, you can support us over at Patreon, patreon.com/3D Musketeers, with tiers starting as low as $1, or you can join the YouTube channel members with the link right below this video. It says join. Click it. It's awesome. I promise. And now let's get back to those fails. We're going to start off with the Eiffel Tower, and I'm going to give a 10 out of 10 for the naming here. This fail is actually really easy to see what's going on here. We've got a part of a resin print that just didn't print until it did. So what happened here? Looks like we got 3 of the 4 legs that actually stuck to the build plate. Remember, the Eiffel Tower prints upside down. It does not need any supports, and it's a really cool model for verifying that you have your printer in tune. Of course, the Tabletop Foundry and some other calibration prints are great, but the Eiffel Tower is always a fun one that serves a purpose outside of just calibrating your printer and understanding the exposure settings. But that leg stuck to the vat, and eventually it got enough surface area that the print itself was able to rip it off the vat, and that is what you are left with. Now, there's a benefit to this fail. That is, there is unlikely to be any cured resin floating around in that vat. That is a massive trap for the young gamers there that aren't really used to making sure that their build plates or their vats are clean. If you have an excess of cured resin inside of your vat and your build plate goes down to home itself, it can actually damage your screen by putting too much pressure on it. Yeah, the mono screens in most resin 3D printers are pretty delicate, and it appears that Elegoo knows this. On their brand new Saturn II, they're actually including a tempered glass screen protector. Uncle Jesse just did a first look at it. We'll card to that video so you guys can take a look. It was a really good video, and if you're looking at a bigger resin printer, the Saturn II does seem like it is one of the ones out there. Unfortunately, we're probably not going to get one. We're not large enough for Elegoo to take us seriously. But hey, you can help by subscribing and sharing with friends that you think might like this content, you know? Or you can just passive-aggressively tell them their prints suck and they need help. Next up, we got Denise. Denise is actually a writer and 3D printing reviewer for Tom's Hardware. Go check out their content. Go follow him on Twitter because Denise has some trouble sometimes. But I think this is one of the ones I think is really valuable to look at. They're saying, how is your day going? Zach Friedman says, Mamma mia, that's quite the plate of spaghetti. And yeah, it's not that much spaghetti, to be frank, but we have a bed that's not level. And that's a pretty easy thing to see here. Let's take a better look at the photo, because I see some purple lights back here. Oh, yes. Hey, look at that. This is a Sovol 3D, and it has a generic BL Touch clone. That means it's not working, or it's not working appropriately, because this Z offset is not only wrong, it's just wrong in general. We are way too far away from the build plate, but it's not consistently far away, which would make it a lot easier if it was. If you are dealing with a printer that has auto bed leveling, but is not auto leveling as you expect, make sure that the bed itself is actually tight. Some of them still have the wheels to adjust the bed itself. Get rid of them. Get rid of the springs and do like a silicone or even a hard mount for the bed itself. If the bed is rigid, you shouldn't have these problems. If the bed is rigid and you are having these problems, make sure your start G code is right, that it is doing the probing every single time. Because let's be real, the probing does not take a lot of extra time, but does ensure that you get a much better print. This could be from a build plate that's a little bit dirty. I can see what appears to be some little fingerprints or dots of oil on there. This is a good thing. Just go ahead and get that build plate clean, but I honestly think that this is just a failure from the BL Touch sensor itself. This is why we do recommend, especially for newbies, make sure that you watch your first layer. You can actually catch this as it's happening and work at either adjusting your baby steps if it's a printer that doesn't allow you to manually adjust the bed level, or start getting onto those wheels and adjust that bed level as the printer is moving. And I know that we don't have one yet, but I do want to mention that there's this new printer called the Bamboo X1 Carbon. I'm really hoping that we can get one to review. If any of you know them, please, I'd really like to review one because they have some really interesting technology where they are using LiDAR for a sample print before the thing starts to print to verify that your flow rate is accurate. And they're also using that same LiDAR for bed leveling. And that is something I haven't seen before and really want to dive in to how that works and why it is as functionally cool as I think it might be. But in Denise's case here, this is convenient in the fact this is a direct drive, so we can pretty much get rid of any issues that might be with the Bowden system, but I still think we have an issue with the auto bed leveling. If we zoom in here using Enhance,
can we enhance this?
We are able to see that we got a little bit of a leftover print on there still. We have a purge line that wasn't perfectly cleaned, but they're clearly doing a bed leveling test. This is indicative of the bed leveling calibration prints where it's a bunch of dots connected by lines. They don't all fall off. Your bed level sucks and also makes it easy to clean when you're done. But yeah, this kind of stuff happens. This is kind of part of the process, I guess. I would not call this a big issue, but something to keep in mind, especially if your printer has a BL Touch. Also, make sure that you're actually actively enabling it in that start code because sometimes manufacturers don't do that. Next up, we got resin vat is leaking from inside the wall. Help. This is a Photon Mono X. I have one of those. Let me get a vat from Photon Mono X and let's compare some things. Okay, here is my vat from the Photon Mono X. I love the reverb from these. This is a brand new vat. I've actually never used the printer. Bought it for a client project that unfortunately never went through, and I just decided to keep it. But we can see some things. I think we got some things missing. And big shout out to Chris Catlett for setting this one over. Chris is now an honorary Musketeer and was posting this up in our Discord. Remember, if you want to join the elite group of Musketeers, you can do so by supporting us on Patreon for $10 or more a month. You get access to our super secret Discord where you can hang out with myself and the rest of the team. We're posting in there pretty often. We like to have some fun conversations there. I immediately see the problem, and Chris pointed it out to me. I said, huh, that's weird. It might be ripped FEP. He said, no, look closer. Have you guys figured it out? Oh, the reverb is so weird. Have you guys figured it out? Have you? Do you know what's wrong here? You don't see the screws. You don't see the screws. So we can see the bigger screws, right? We can see these larger screws here, but the smaller screws we actually don't see, which tells me they likely changed the FEP and forgot to put all of those little screws in. They said everything was fine during printing, no major leaks from what I could tell. I emptied the rest of the resin after printing and spilled some of it. I placed it back on the screen after some hours. It had leaked on the screen and the surrounding areas from underneath. I tested the leakage with IPA as suggested in other posts, but nothing. I cleaned the vat again, and after some hours, it was leaking more resin again. I guess that I should probably just open it, clean it, and add new foil, but any suggestions if what I have done wrong or what happened? The comments tell us that this printer is stock and they haven't actually changed the FEP, which tells me maybe this printer was used when they got it. But here's what I think is happening. As the print is pulling away, as the build plate itself is pulling away from the vat, you're putting force and pressure on this FEP. That is causing it to separate ever so slightly from the frame that lies in here. That is causing the leak. Now, they could have a bit of a leak around an edge, but if IPA doesn't wick out and it's only happening during printing, I have a feeling that the screws aren't there. This is a bone stock build plate. It has never been touched. I've never even printed with it. And you can see all along it, the screws are easily visible, which tells me something here ain't right. Put this back because the reverb is starting to bother me. So what can be done here? If this is a fairly new printer, verify by taking out all the big screws that the little screws actually are there. If they're not and it's a newer printer, send it back. It should not be like this. If the screws are there, I'm guessing they are a little bit loose. If they're there, they're not loose, and it still leaks, just replace the FEP. It might have torn a little bit and the resin is wicking out, but because it's not actually popped through, I have reason to believe those screws aren't actually there. This one stumped me for a little bit until Chris pointed that out, and I said, damn it, you're right. This is not a fail that we've shown on the channel before, and not one that I think happens very often. I've never seen it happen before, but it's one to note. If you don't follow the right procedures and processes for changing your FEP, you might run into this problem. We did a video on changing FEP. We'll card to it so you guys can take a look, where we were working on maintaining a resin 3D printer. Next up, we got a fail from Mech Solutions Limited. This is a new kind of printing failure for us. The filament snapped in the extruder and started to wrap around the printer's frame while we were printing out some chainmail fabric designed by NASA. Let's take a look at this one. Oof. Big oof. Yeah, that's a cut my losses and run there. Wow. That is a shame. That's a shame. One, that's a lot of material down the drain, but I want to point something out here. We've got a lot of filament dust that has built up here. I think this thing is clogged. I don't see snapping happen often like this unless it's clogged. And your extruder pressure is so high that instead of just grinding the filament, which is normal, it snaps it and just forces it out of the extruder. This, again, gives me reason to believe that the Creality style of extruder, this Mark 8 system with this spring, gives way too much tension, because realistically, if you got a clog, I want my filament to grind. Now, it could have ground, right? We can see a fair bit of damage here, and it could have ground all the way through. That is more likely what occurred here, because we've got signs of grinding, we've got the dust all over the place, and then we've got filament, and I wonder if we can see the end of it. Let's see if we can find the end. No, there's probably no way for us to see the end, but I would be curious to see if it, for some reason, has an end that is a little bit tapered, and that means that it would be a ground bit of filament. Ooh, actually, wait a minute. Right there. Now, I don't know what side that is, but we can definitely see a break. That could have been just where they cut it. I don't know. Yeah, my best guess here is it clogged, it jammed, it ground the filament, it broke that, and then it just kept feeding more filament. So unfortunately, that is a waste of material. Thankfully, it doesn't appear that it was anything too special, but if it was, F's in the chat. And I think they've done a lot of the kind of major upgrades that we would look at, one of that being the Capricorn tube, although it could be like that from factory. This is a bummer when this stuff happens, but as Jordan here says, that is certainly an impressive failure. And we've covered this a couple of times. There are some ways to solve this, and one of them is to look at a better extruder design that uses a dual gear system to grab the filament on both sides. Now, that's not going to stop a clog. To stop a clog, you need to not use crappy filament and make sure that it hasn't been in a dusty environment. You also have to make sure that your nozzle isn't crap, your hot end isn't crap. Normally, especially with PTFE lined hot ends, over time, that PTFE that is inside of your hot end, the one that goes through the melt zone of the printer itself, will start to wear. And that wear causes friction on the filament that is going through it. And eventually that friction builds up to where the filament no longer goes through and is not actually jammed in the nozzle, it's jammed in the PTFE liner. When we were printing heavily with PTFE line machines, back in the olden days, we would replace the PTFE about once a week or every 5 kilos. Now, that is not necessary, that is overkill for most people, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. Problems like this are why we don't use PTFE lined hot ends anymore. Now, I don't know if they were using an all metal or not, but given the fact that it's an ender, we can see it's an ender, we got the little E for ender there, I'd hedge a bet that it's most likely a stock printer. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you gotta be careful because sometimes they need a little bit more maintenance than something that is a bit more expensive. Have you ever seen this in a direct drive and all metal? Let's take a look. Did you catch that? One more time. Excuse me? No, guys, watch the hot end. What kind of Z hopping are we looking at there? I might have already read the comments on this one, so I know that my guess was correct. My guess was the hot end itself is actually loose, and the retraction is actually pulling up the entire hot end, which hilariously should kind of also work, but we can see Z-Hop 2.0. I just stopped it, and yeah, it's totally loose. Yep, this is a common problem with printers that don't have really well constrained hot ends, especially if your hot end is only held in with a grub screw or two. If you don't make sure those are tight on a routine basis, they can actually back themselves out over time, causing your hot end itself to kind of wiggle. Now, you get a little lucky in that hopefully the heater wires are short enough that it can't completely fall out, because if it does, it's likely going to have a problem that we saw from DeWitt 3D. We covered that in a past PrintFixFriday where the entire hot end and hot side for their printer fell out while they had walked away and was on the verge of catching fire. We'll card that video so you guys can take a look. That fail was ridiculous. But they caught this one early. They noticed there was the problem, and this is why we recommend not to leave printers unattended, especially if you've been working on it. We can see it's got an aftermarket fan duct, and I think that might be a mount for like a BL Touch that's not on there. But yeah, I'm glad they figured out the problem and that they actually posted the solution. It's common that people will have a problem and they don't post a solution, and that means that future people that find this thread won't be able to get any help. But check those grub screws, check to make sure everything is tight up against each other. And remember, if it is a nozzle heat break issue, make sure you do that when the printer is hot. For a non-all metal printer, about 240 degrees centigrade. For an all metal printer, take that up to 285 or even 290 so you can hot tighten everything. That way you don't get any leaks in the future. But I can generally believe this is on the cold side, if not on the heat sink side, because we're not seeing big blobs. And by this point, if it was at the nozzle and heater block side, you would absolutely have seen a blob. So glad they caught it early. This is a great little tip for those out there that are looking at doing printer modding. Make sure that all of your screws are tight. Why are the supports absorbing into the object? It started doing this recently. Let's take a look. All right, so we've got a couple of things going on here. We've got support material that is really, really close to the part, but it's a barrel, and the bottom of the barrel is not done. Let's see what we got. This is a clear resin. Light bleed is probably a factor. I would agree here. Dropping UV power, if your printer is able, will help. I recommend 60% power for clear resins. And Chris has a good point here that clear resin, and you can see that it's yellow. Yellow means it's been overexposed. With clear resin, if it turns yellow, it's overexposed. It's a great, easy way to figure that out. And some clear resins will instantly turn yellow. It's not your fault, but generally speaking, with most good quality clear resins, if they turn yellow, they're overexposed. But I would also verify that the contact distance, the distance itself from the build plate to the part that you're printing, is at least 5 millimeters. You want to give the printer enough time to get those bottom layers, and then enough time for the supports to have some substance to them. Also, this is definitely not the right orientation to print this part. It was printed absolutely vertically. For a part like this, you'd want to tilt it at an angle to reduce the overall surface area. And absolutely, for a part like this, you could easily hollow it out and save a lot of resin. But unfortunately, we don't have much more in terms of settings from the user. I'm also concerned because we can see some obvious pixels on this part that they might be running maybe an older printer that doesn't have a good resolution to it. This is not common. And yes, you can fix it with anti-aliasing and certainly by going to a printer with a higher resolution screen. But I believe Chris is right here that light bleed could be a factor. Make sure that your screen is properly blocking that light. You should be able to check it by starting a print, putting a piece of paper over the screen so you're not exposing your eyes directly to the UV. Make sure your vat is removed, of course. Take off your build plate so you can actually see things, and see if you can get that light bleeding through the LCD panel itself. If you can, it is time to go ahead and lower that percentage of UV power if possible. If not, reduce your overall exposure time. But again, also look at orienting the part a little bit differently, or for a part like this, you might be able to get away with printing it directly on the build plate. But that's really all that I have for you guys today. Remember, if you want to get your fails shown here on PrintFixFriday, you can tag us on all the social medias as well as use the hashtags PrintFix. But stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, and a massive thank you goes out to all of our Patreon and YouTube channel member supporters whose names are listed right next to me at the $5 tier and higher. Remember, if you want to join the elite group of Musketeers, you can do so by heading over to patreon.com/3dmusketeers and supporting the content that we do for as little as $1 a month, or you can hit the join button right below this video. Right below me will be the entire PrintFix Friday series, and right next to that will be the printer maintenance series, so you can get those printers running right. I will see you guys down in those comments and in the next one. Take care.